New Artist Spotlight Podcast. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the New Artist Spotlight Podcast. I'm your co-host, Origin Cross, joined today by...
Hi, I'm Lisa Haden, and today we're welcoming a man whose music is destined for the big screen. It is Scott Shaw. Hi,
Hello.
Scott.
Hi, Lisa. Hey, Origin. How are you going? How are you doing today?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Oh, great. It's a great weekend.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
So for everybody who's getting to know you today, right? Give us a little introduction of who you are, type of music you make.
Sure. Well, my name is Scott Shaw. I'm a multi-genre artist, and my music is really all over the place. For a while, the running joke was that my genre was add a violin, where I would just put a violin in places where you don't normally see a violin. So I would play on rock songs. I'd play on heavy metal songs. I'm really into hip hop. So I have a lot of music that is me playing the violin over hip hop beat. And then recently I've gotten back into composing and making music for orchestra. So a lot of my music now, as Lisa mentioned, is more oriented towards a film score type of music.
Awesome.
So I'm interested to know what drew you to actually playing the violin. I actually took a few months of violin lessons, and the only thing I learned that is if you play a violin badly, it makes a sound that's really difficult to power through. So what attracted you to the violin?
Actually, it wasn't me initially. My mom had me start taking violin lessons when I was 5 years old. So I was really too young to have a say in the matter. But then I stuck with it. And then in time, I realized how versatile the instrument was and how many different places I could put it into. And so I really grew to love it as an adult.
That's cool. So do you play other instruments as well, or is it primarily violin?
Mm-hmm. I do. I've also played the piano for about as long as I've played the violin, but I also play guitar, bass, percussion. So I do a lot of different stuff. The violin is the one people see me do the most just because it's something different and a way to stand out.
So on your songs, does that mean that you've played all the instruments on those songs?
Yes.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Other than there's some collaborations that I've done, but on all the rest of them, I'm playing every instrument that you hear on the track. Either if it's something that I do have and can record, I'm playing it. But there are also virtual instruments that I'm doing as well.
Got you. And then are you doing the mixing and mastering of it yourself, or are you exporting that out for somebody else?
No, I do the mixing and the mastering also.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Quality.
And the production is slick. It's fantastic. So I've got to be honest, I thought that must be something that you'd outsource to somebody else because it sounds quite professional.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. No, I knew that if the film industry music was something that I wanted to get into, which it was one of my long-term goals, that splitting up all of that work meant maybe splitting up the profit or coming out a lot out of my pocket. Just money I didn't have as an independent artist. So I learned early on how to mix and that's been one of the things for the last 4 or 5 years that I've really been working on.
Brilliant. So your music has got quite storytelling, isn't it? When I listened to it, I wrote down 3 words. One of them was storytelling, the other was theatrical, and the other was big screen. So how is it that you come up with these tracks? Is it a case of you've just played a violin part and then you work everything else around it, or do you have that story idea at the beginning?
Depends on what type of piece of music I'm working on, but on the cinematic ones, I am typically thinking of the kind of scene that I might want it to be in. And then I do usually start with a theme that I start building with all the instruments and taking around. I also have a strong draw to the rhythmic elements of music. And so on almost all my songs, I'll pretty flesh out the beat that I'm going to do, whether that's with a percussion section or, if I go to the hip hop that I do, that's where it starts. I find a beat that really speaks to me, and then the violin music starts coming out of that.
Okay. So go even deeper into that. Tell us a little bit more about your process of kind of creating a song or kind of where your inspiration starts from and then how you kind of take it from there.
Sure. Well, I'll jump back into the orchestral part. So I do have a lot of inspiration. Back when I was a kid, I really got into Star Wars as a kid. And the John Williams music was a big part of that. And so I just started noticing music in movies and how much impact that makes. So that's where a lot of that inspiration came from for me. I came from a classical music background, which sometimes that was a 50-50 split for me, whether it was inspiring or not. But it seemed like the film score music really always spoke to me. Maybe it's just a dramatic element to that. But, when I'm thinking about a full orchestra, I start to think there's the melody. So I'm going to play that melody in some instrument that can take a lead. And then I'm going to start basically passing the baton to some different instruments. So I want to make sure in the course of my song that I've got a big brass feature at some point in time, and that I've got a woodwind feature and a strings feature. And so really I'm thinking through the different sections. If it's going to get quieter, maybe that's a good time to go woodwinds. If we're going to go big and majestic, maybe that's a good time to go brass. So, start with that melody. Who can have the melody win? What parts is that going to be? And then I start building some kind of supporting cast with the other instruments underneath that. And so I'll say, okay, the woodwinds are in charge here. So I'm going to do maybe some light strings or some light percussion, or the brass are in charge here. So I've got a lot of room to go big. Maybe I'll bring in a choir. Maybe I'll have some kind of more soaring strings. So I'll start to piece it together that way. And then once I finish all of that, then I just listen through the track and think, what else does this track need to keep it moving or to keep it exciting?
Well, that's amazing, because normally when you hear a song, it's almost like it's focused on one instrument and then everything else is a support to that. But the fact that you go from one to the other, I think it really keeps the song interesting and it keeps it moving along. So that's fantastic. You did mention about collaborations. So how does that work when you collaborate with somebody else?
Well, we're all in the New Artist Spotlight group, and one of my favorite things that's come out of this group is that I've had the opportunity to play on 7 different tracks that were collaborations between myself and other NAS artists. And so there's a couple different ways I've done it. One way that I've done the collaboration is I've taken an existing song from 3 different NAS artists and I've added orchestra to them. So in those cases, one was with the song You Matter to Us by Yao Aranha. And so that's just a vocal and a piano. And so I made an orchestration around it and basically put Yao on stage with the orchestra. And I composed the whole orchestration around what he was doing. So that was great fun. That was the first one that I did. And then a couple of them that I did were big rock orchestra songs, one with Terrestrial Animal and one with Marcus Magnuson, where I took what they had already done in that song. I built an orchestration around it and I mixed it to where it sounds like it's a live performance with all of us together. But I've also had several where I was just adding a violin to something someone had already done. So Bad Scullions has got me on a track, Belly of the Beast. I did one with Big Bald Ben, where he's just singing an acoustic version of one of his songs, Someone Else's Wave, added violin to that. And then there's a collaborative group that Jules Sherwood, a NAS artist, puts together, but also Billy Lowry's done some singing on that. And so a lot of familiar NAS faces where they would send me a track and say, hey, we just want to add in vocal or violin on this. So they'd already done everything but add me basically to those tracks. So I would take it in the studio, I'd see what I could do with the track, and then I'd add a violin to it and then sent it back to them, and they took care of the rest in those kind of situations.
Have you had any experiences where you're collaborating kind of from the set out of the song rather than kind of the tail end or adding on to like a kind of almost like a remix of it?
On the ones that I've done with the NAS artists, it's always been me coming in on the tail end to just try to put some icing on the cake, if you will, musically. For the hip hop violin songs that I've done, there is a producer, M43, that I do work with. And so we have made beats together from scratch. And then I've played violin on top of that. And so, that collaboration was more like I would come up with some ideas, some melodic ideas, and I'd send him some loops, and then he'd build a beat around that loop, and then he'd send it back to me, and then I'd add the lead violin to that.
So you've had an opportunity to kind of work in a lot of different ways. That's a really cool, really good experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've mentioned obviously about having a classical background and being impacted by the music that you hear on movies such as Star Wars. What other musical inspirations have you had? You've mentioned that you like hip hop and rock. So what artists have you sort of listened to over the years that's influenced your music now?
Sure. So with the violin specifically, there's a couple of different bands that had a big impact on me, just an eye-opening for what a violin could be. One of them in the 90s, there was this jam band called the Dave Matthews Band, if you're familiar with them, but it's just like a normal band, but they have a violinist and they have a saxophonist that take turns playing solos and doing interesting things. So I heard that and I thought, man, that's something that I could actually do. And I ended up playing in a Dave Matthews cover band. So I learned all of these violin parts that came out of that band. And then there's another band that was popular in the 2000s, a punk pop band called Yellow Card. That again, it was a punk pop band, but they featured a violin that almost functioned as a second guitarist. And so I learned a lot of those songs too. So those two bands really had a lot of influence on me as a violinist. Just as a musician in general, though, the band U2 was very inspirational for me in the way that I play guitar. And then as a pianist, there's a couple of bands. Coldplay was pretty inspirational to me as a piano player, but also Billy Joel and Elton John. I draw a lot of influence from in those. And then hip hop, I grew up in the 80s. And so a lot of the old school 80s hip hop I really loved. And then in the 90s, when hip hop became a lot more mainstream, a lot of those artists in that era were very popular, and I loved every second of that. So a lot of the hip hop from that time was something that I really loved, especially, the musical production around it. A lot of people, when they listen to hip hop, are drawn to the lyricism or the flow, and I am definitely, but I'm just as, if not more, drawn to the way that the beat makers make the beat and what's going on in the instrumental. I'm probably more that way with almost all music, though. The instrumental part of music really grabs my attention more than the vocal or the lyrics do.
No, I completely understand that. Like when I listen to Mumford and Sons, sometimes I don't even listen to the lyrics. I'm just listening to the music. And especially with hip hop, because you hear a lot of sound effects type things that you wouldn't hear in ordinary songs. And I'm always caught sort of by surprise. Like, oh, that's a random noise to have, but it works in the song.
Sure.
I feel like, especially on the hip hop end, as I guess the hip hop community goes, there's kind of like a thing that everybody's always saying is like, oh, people don't even listen to the lyrics anymore. They only listen to the beats. And I think in the like 80s, 90s, right, where you had a lot of artists that were like, it was like a combination between the producer and an artist, right? And the producer was kind of basically a collaborator, like more so than how we look at it nowadays, where it's like, okay, the producer made the beat, but this is the artist's song. I think in the 90s that stigma was probably a lot different because like, oh, I can't wait to see what Dr. Dre did on this beat versus now where it's like whatever they're saying doesn't even matter. If the beat's good, I'll put it on. Right.
That's funny you say that because like Dr. Dre is the first person when I think of like hip hop beats that capture my imagination. He's the first one I think of. I think of the first time that I heard The Chronic back in 1992. When I was a freshman in high school, as I date myself. But like that was to hear what he did with those tracks or to hear what he did on the first Snoop Dogg album with those tracks. Oh my goodness, there's so much amazing work that Dre did back then that producers, have been chasing ever since then, I think.
Yeah, it's crazy to see the way that shift has happened, right? And even just from the kind of like I was saying, the producer kind of being one of the two artists or one of the group of artists that were on the song back in that time, and to now, if it's a Dr. Dre beat, you probably don't even know he produced it unless you just are really good at identifying Dr. Dre, or you dig into the song and you find out it was produced by him, or somebody who's like, obviously they always work with Dr. Dre. But nowadays, kind of producers, aside from them having their tags on songs, right? They're just kind of the afterthought, even though a lot of people are listening more to the beat than they are to the artist. And so I just think that's just an observation of the way kind of things have changed from a hip hop perspective, is from like the listener standpoint over time.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So as you've obviously been doing music for a large portion of your life, right? Pretty much your whole life at this point, right? And you have these, cinematic sounding songs that sound like they would be perfect for the big screen. I think my wife said, I can't remember exactly what it was, but I think she said like the alone song. So I'm not sure if that's like a song that's on Survivor or a show that's like Survivor, but she was trying to explain it to me. She's like, this is what Hunters made her think of, right? And that was just me playing it and her coming by and being like, oh, this sounds like, So for you, right, like where do you kind of hope to take your music just when all is said and done?
I'm doing a lot of different things in music. And so, there's many different individual goals that I would like to sustain. One would be, yes, to get into sync licensing and to pitch my music and it be on a show or on a movie, or to score a soundtrack for a video game or something like that, I think would be incredible. I would love to do something. If you played like Assassin's Creed, games like that have an incredible soundtrack, and there's lots of need for that. At the same time, I'm taking that slow because that's a tough industry to get into with a lot of competition. And I just want the music to be completely undeniable when I go to a sync rep and say, here, this is what you need. And so it's that's hard to feel like, man, I've got to that point where it's good enough. Maybe I'm my own worst critic sometimes, but so that's there. Obviously with the other music that I do, you want it to take off in a certain sense, but I would love to get to where, I just have a steady flow of releasing music that people really enjoy, that's innovative and creative, and then also gives me the opportunity. We mentioned the collaborations. That's really important to me. So I do have a goal of continuing putting out music with as many different people as I can. And, whether that's helping a new musician along or getting with somebody that's very experienced. Either way, I think there's a lot of benefit to the collaboration.
Yeah. And if I could real quick, I just want to circle back to the thing that you said as far as getting even on video games, right? A lot of times when people talk about sync licensing and pitching songs, they talk movies or TV shows. I don't hear a lot of people actually mention video games, but like you said, Assassin's Creed's soundtrack. And I just remember growing up with Madden, NBA Live, the WWE, like SmackDown versus Raw, 2Ks, all of those. And the soundtracks were like a big part of that. Even like Need for Speed, like there are songs that until like in recent years have like always just been in my brain. And when I think back to them, I'm like, oh, this is from that game. And I'll go like try to search it up and find it and see if I can download it. But I think, video games might be when it kind of gets looked over. So that's just interesting that you brought that one up.
Yeah, I think it's one of my favorite potential markets, because that, there's so many scenes in the video game where it's just a dude fighting a monster type of a situation. And a lot of that music that I make, I think lends itself well to that type of feel and vibe. You mentioned Hunters, and as I was thinking about that opening percussion part of Hunters, it was very inspired by The Lord of the Rings. And I just thought of a whole bunch of orcs getting ready to go to battle. And that feel just came to me there. So I think it's a place where my music could be used.
Absolutely. I've got to be honest, I'm not a massive gamer, so the only music I can remember is like Sonic the Hedgehog or Mario Brothers. But I do love Lord of the Rings, and I think that soundtrack is absolutely amazing, and you'd be great at something like that. You did mention collaborations with numerous NAS artists. So can you tell us a little bit about your NAS journey? When did you start? How did you find us?
Yeah, I started a couple of years ago. It was on a recommendation from Emily Gray. We were friends outside of the community and had done a track together and just been supporters of each other's music along the way. And one day we were talking and she mentioned it to me. That was something I should check out. And so I did. And then I started getting involved and just really fell in love with the community. The more I started listening to the top 20 radio show and participating in that, just seeing how everyone was so positive towards each other and supportive of each other. And then listening to Mr. Odzo's Thursday show. And again, seeing how everybody helped each other out. And then through the week, you see people posting in the chat, here's some different opportunities where you can get on A Break Radio. You can support our artists this way, and everybody just keeps supporting each other. That's the kind of community that I was really hoping for, but maybe didn't even think existed. We get hit with so many advertisements where they just want you to pay for a service, but that's not at all what this is. This is a community that actually helps each other.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. There's a lot of different initiatives within the group, right? And in a lot of ways that New Artist Spotlight sets itself apart from other groups, communities, and just kind of really experiences that you will find online trying to be an independent artist looking to grow themselves in their career, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what song are we going to listen to today?
The song that I sent in to Andres is a brand new song. It's not even released yet. Comes out June the 20th. And this song is called The Hero's Flight. So it's another orchestral song. It's one I was thinking along the lines of when you see in a movie, there's a lot of times a scene before a big action scene where your heroes are gathered and they're getting all inspired for the action scene that's about to happen. And then they go out and they do it. And I was just picturing maybe like Iron Man or Superman or something like that, flying around and zooming around and having an action sequence. So that's what this song is.
Fantastic. Awesome. Do you want to give us a little introduction?
Sure.
Introduce the song.
Sure. This is my brand new song, The Hero's Flight, coming out June the 20th.
You guys heard it here first. New Artist Spotlight podcast exclusive. The Hero's Flight.
Here we go. Coming your way soon.
Awesome. Well, thank you for letting us debut your song. That's a great honor.
Yeah, I'm glad to give it to you.
Pivoting from glad to sad and mad and dreary and gloomy. You know it's coming. This is everybody's favorite part of the show, right? Where we try to break you in front of all of the watchers at home, where we go into the new artist spotlight, Quickfire Five. I'm sure you're familiar.
I've seen this in action before.
Oh yeah. Lisa, hit him with the rules.
Okay, so we're going to throw 5 questions at you. You have 15 seconds to answer each question. And if you don't answer it in the time, then all your music is removed from Spotify and you have to start all over again.
All right.
It's very serious stuff.
Question number 1, because I couldn't find it. Is your music available on Apple Music? And if so, under what name?
So some of it is, but actually Apple Music doesn't release classical music. They have a separate app. And since my music, much of it is classified as classical, it is not on Spotify. It's on Apple, excuse me. It is on Spotify. All of it's on Spotify. But it's under Scott Shaw on all the places, just not the classical stuff on Apple.
Okay. Question 2. If you could have spend a day with one NAS artist, who would it be and why?
Okay, I'm spending a day with Big Bald Ben because he and I need to rock together. And so that's what I'm doing on my day with my NAS artist. I'm hanging out with Big Bald Ben and we're going to do a live show and we're going to rock together.
Awesome. We need tickets to that.
Question number 3. Who is your favorite artist of all time?
My favorite artist of all time is a fellow violinist named Lindsay Sterling. I don't know if you're familiar with her work, but she's very inspirational. She plays the violin. She plays non-classical music on the violin, but she's also a ballerina of sorts. And so if you go to one of her live shows, you will see her dance all over the stage while playing the violin like a champion. It's incredible.
Wow. Okay, question number 4. What is your guilty pleasure song?
So I actually don't believe in guilty pleasure songs. I actually believe that if you like a song, like a song. If you don't like a song, don't like it. But, I don't think I have a guilty pleasure song per se, but my son is really into the video game music from all the video games that he plays. And you mentioned Mario earlier, but actually like that Mario music that goes da-na-na-na-na, da-na-na-na-na, that one? He listens to that all the time, and I've gotten to where I'm like, man, I love that song. And so that's kind of a weird song that I really like.
Question number 5. Define a successful life in your terms.
A successful life is a life where everyone around you knows that they're loved and accepted and safe, and they are living a better life because of your impact on them.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I like it.
That's lovely, yeah. And I think you might have passed that. We'll have to check with Andreas, but
okay.
Question 4 was up there. I don't know. We're gonna have to put the timer on you.
Yeah, that's true.
All right.
So, what can we expect next from you? Do you have any other albums coming out?
So I do have several orchestral works that are in process. I've got, other than the one that's dropping here on the 20th, I've got 3 more that I've already mostly recorded and just in the process of mixing and mastering and going through all that. And then really, that's the direction that I'm headed for the foreseeable future. I do have some potential collabs that are way off in the distance. They've not really come together yet, but there's conversations happening. So we'll see where those go. But I'm focused in on getting this orchestral music made and out for now.
Nice. So I guess if you as an artist had to kind of give yourself a tagline or a brand or just a general message, right? What you want people to get from your music or from your impact, right? What would that be for you?
I think it would be that, whatever life is, we can always be more creative and more curious. Whatever limits we think we have for ourselves or for our music, we can always push it a lot further and deeper and wider than maybe we had the imagination to see up front.
I like that.
Love that. Mm-hmm. And if a new artist were to listen to you and sort of say to themselves, I want to be that good, how do I get to being that good? What would you say to them?
You have to make the decision every single day to put the work in. That's how music works. That's how any of it works. You have to practice every day. And whatever end goal you have to take the little steps along the way to get there. I've been playing the violin for over 40 years now. And so, a person maybe can't do what I do on the violin if they've only been playing for 3 years. But if they practice hard for 3 years, they can do some pretty incredible things. But, my son is a percussionist, and so but he's 13. He's been playing the percussion for about 2 or 3 years now. And so we're going through that with him. You start where you are, you start learning skills, you start putting those skills together, and you push yourself a little bit every day. So it's just consistency, lots and lots of practice.
I think that's really important. I see a lot of people who get frustrated because they're not where they want to be. And I think that as you say, it's those little steps in between. As long as you're moving forward and you're taking each of those little steps, you're progressing, you're going to get to that end goal. But if you're just going to get frustrated before you've given yourself a chance to get to that end goal, I don't think you're then going to get there, because you're just going to just give up.
Right. And I'm of the mindset of I'm never really satisfied either. When I get to where it is I need to be, the next thing I need to do is move the goalpost. Okay, what's the next thing I need to accomplish, and how do I get there? So it's a lifelong journey, but it's a little steps along the way.
So would you say you're always evolving, you're always learning and, picking up new skills?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to.
So is there you feel like a balance between like giving yourself the grace to know that you need to learn and grow versus also telling yourself like you kind of mentioned earlier, like being your own worst critic and like pushing yourself to do better and grow in that sense?
Yeah, I mean it's tricky. I'm a different level of critical for all the different musical things that I do, and some things come really naturally to me, and some things I have to work really hard at to get. I've been playing the guitar for a long time too, but the violin comes way more naturally than the guitar does for me. So like I have to really work at the guitar if I want to do something good on it. So you have to keep it all in perspective. But I always try to prepare way beyond what I need to deliver when I'm performing, so that when I'm performing, I can just have fun and be in the moment and know that like, if my brain gets off, my finger memory has got me covered. I'm ready to come and do the thing I need to do, but the preparation is the key that opens up all those doors.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm. So when you're performing, if you do happen to sort of, because this is what happens to me, is I get in my own head when I'm performing, and then I think I trip myself up. So would you say that your practice allows you to do it from muscle memory to prevent you from getting in your own head? Is that sort of how you get around it, or do you find that still happens to you on occasion where you're overthinking it in the moment and that trips you up?
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, obviously, the more I have the benefit of, I've done a lot of performing and been in a lot of situations where I've had the opportunity to perform regularly. So that's practice too. But I heard an interesting quote about music. Someone asked a guitarist once, "What are you thinking of when you're on stage shredding?" And he said, "If you're thinking, you're stinking." I thought, oh, that's pretty good. So, there's a lot to think about when you're performing, right? I think I spent my whole childhood just thinking about, okay, I got to play these right notes. I got to go fast enough. Or if I'm singing something, I got to remember all these words. Oh my goodness, but that just makes it hard. For me, that makes it easy to get caught up on, oh man, I missed that one thing. And then a landslide begins. But you got to know, like, when is it okay to mess up? If I do mess up, can I mess up in a way that is fine? There's a lot of mess ups that you can make on stage that are just fine. The audience doesn't know that you messed up. I mean, maybe there's some diehard Lisa fans that know that you just missed a lyric, but a lot what we're going to encounter as independent artists a lot of time are people that are just like happy to hear some good music. And so, give them a show, and I don't have to play the exact same thing on my violin every time. I can play something a little bit different and give them something special.
No, I like that. I like that a lot. I want to give you the opportunity to let everybody know where they can find you online and check out your music.
Sure. So it's Scott Shaw Music on all the socials, TikTok, Instagram, the TikTok and Instatalk, on Insta, on TikTok, on Facebook, Blue Sky, all the places. Scott Shaw Music. If you look up on Spotify, would be the main place that I would encourage you to go. You can look up Scott Shaw there. There's another Scott Shaw that's got big, crazy hair. Obviously, I'm not that guy, but if you see a dude with the violin, that's my music. So you can check that out there.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Well, thank you.
Is there anything else you want to leave us with?
So for any of the other independent artists out there, I just want to encourage you to use this community, NAS, that we have. Reach out if you need help, if you need any kind of advice, if you want to collaborate. Just reach out to your fellow artists, because that's what we're here to do in this community, is to help each other succeed.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on and spending some time with us today. Let us get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
And I want to send a big shout out and big thank you to everybody who is helping to support this community, push this community, help artists, and kind of just selflessly giving them themselves for the good of all of us, right? That's what this community is built on. That's what makes us successful and what makes us different. So I want to send a big thank you out to everybody who is helping out.
Thank you.
All right. Cool. Peace out, everybody.
All
Bye.
right. Have a great Sunday.
Take care.
New Artist Spotlight.